I just got through suffering through another Trimet General Manager report starring Neil, the dickhead McFarlane. And the Trimet General Manager report is significant for one thing, really, and that one thing is for his lack of discussion about anything really important. And that's pretty much why I don't watch these meetings anymore, because the only thing that fascinates me in the meetings is the public testimony. It's kind of like if you look at a contract, for example, the only thing you should read in a contract is the fine print, the stuff that they don't want you to read. And it's kind of like the board meeting. There's nothing to read in the big print at a board meeting. You know, all the executives getting up there, patting themselves on the back, saying how great everything is. There's no point in reading that. You read the fine print. The fine print are the public testimonies here. That's the fine print. What are people feeling? What are real people? Not the paid bureaucrats, not these six-figure executives. Anyway, McFarlane will address Ben Fain's remark that the bridge was chosen not for its design, but for something else. When we all know that this bridge is a addition to the Portland skyline, another great thing to put in the tourist magazines. Those of us who study this stuff understand what's really going on here. You know, there's only a very few bunch of us. It's less than 100, I think. It's probably less than 50. I know it's at least 30. Okay, that much. There's at least 30 serious transit geeks that really do watch this stuff. It could be up to 100. It depends on the issue. But those of us that actually follow know that this bridge really has nothing to do with, they're doing it because they got the money from Milwaukee Light Rail, a town going to a town of 20,000 people. But the bridge itself, and the reason they've made it into this media event, even though it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen, is it's going to add to the Portland skyline, and you know that's going to show up in the tourist magazines just like the tram. I rode the tram once as a tourist with a bunch of other transit bloggers, and it was all very nice, but it's got nothing to do with transit, okay? At least the Milwaukee Bridge has something to do with transit. It's got the lines going to go over it. So he addressed that and says, oh, no, we're not really interested in the aesthetics of the bridge. And, that's a lie. I mean, he lies with such a straight face. Watch McFarlane closely, because what you see with McFarlane is this very, very bland. He always has this very bland delivery. He never gets excited. He's very good at what he does. He's very professional because he's such a good liar. The better the liar, the greater the professional. That's why they get paid the big money, because they can lie so well. You have to understand that. These people don't get the big money because they're doing anything altruistic. They're doing it because they're able to lie. And that's what CEOs do. They're able to cut people's throats, and they're able to lie with a straight face. Now, this is going to go to the next clip. I'm not going to interrupt this. I'm just going to let you watch, where they talk about the Opal appeal, and it goes to that Shelley Devine. It's the first time we've heard her. And she's an interesting character study. Listen to her, okay? She might be the most articulate counsel I've seen yet. We never heard anything from the millionaire guy, that guy that looked like a ghost. I don't even remember. You know who I'm talking about. The guy with the $11,000 amount. I don't even remember his name. But he never said anything. And then there was the black woman. Yeah, she was kind of like, was she really that intelligent? I don't know. She was probably the token black up there. And now we have this porn star named Shelley Devine. Listen to her. She's interesting, but she'll talk about this Title VI complaint, and she says a whole lot of nothing, okay? And then it will segue into John L. Bell talking about the equity analysis. Now, why am I going to let you see this? Because what you really see here, if you really understand these, you see the perfect government bullshit right in front of your face. All this nonsense that they're talking about would only happen with government. They're talking about, who knows what when he's talking about the equity analysis, it makes basically no sense at all. And here we have the FTA granddaddy federal government who's requiring us to do all this. You know, all these levels of bureaucrats complicating every single thing. And so what you really see here is why government is such a huge fucking failure. First of all, they can put up roadblocks whenever they want. In the case of Opal, it was intentional. I'm sure they intentionally conspired to punish Opal. I don't care what these bureaucrats say. I know it was intentional. And they've even offered to withdraw all of this if Opal did. So we know this is all manufactured resistance. And you hear these bureaucrats talking about this bureaucratic process that means nothing to anybody except them. And it's quite pathetic because you see government in action here. And Dan Christensen said it best. He made a tweet, or was it I don't know, one of his posts. He's a very interesting fellow to follow. He's good stuff. He said, if you go, those of you who think socialism would be better than free market, we don't have a free market, but those of you who think socialism, imagine Trimet in charge of the world. And is that not the perfect analogy? Because he's exactly right. And here you'll see it in action.
Mr. Board President, members of the board, good morning. I did want to give you a couple updates. First, let me respond to a couple of comments that you heard in public forum. First of all, I do know that Mr. Saporta has informed Mr. Anderson that we are aware of some of these issues with the tests. Recall we're testing 4 different pedestrian warning systems, and indeed some of them are a little loud at the wrong times of day and night, and so those sorts of adjustments are underway, and we're attempting to do that. We have some adjustment ability to turn them off in certain areas. If we do that, we want to make sure that we're being true to the test plan that that sort of accompanied this grant overall. So we want to make sure that during this test period, which really runs from now through about August, if I'm recalling, that we're really giving them, each of the systems, a good fair test. Now, obviously, we're going to be responsive to our neighbors. We'll look for ways to turn it down at night. We'll look for ways to turn it off in certain areas if it's misfiring, as the example on Wisteria, I think, indicate that's not where we want to see those warnings to go off. So we'll continue to work on that, but again, a little bit of patience is going to be required as we work through not just one system, but 4 different systems on a number of different bus lines. But again, that is all part of the test plan that we're conducting really for the Federal Transit Administration and ourselves as we learn more about these systems. So technology is always a little tricky at times, and I think we're at that phase where we're trying to fine-tune this for our neighbors. We also know that there's been some complaints up in the Woodlawn neighborhood, and similarly we're looking for the solutions there. So we're, again, following the issues and attempting to resolve them. Just to note about Mr. Fain's comments about the bridge, I just wanted to emphasize that bridge was the most efficient design for the location and the river channel issues that we faced as we designed that. So there was no, if you will, the aesthetics were not the major part of choosing the bridge type. But then in executing the bridge type that was selected as most efficient for that location, obviously we bring some aesthetics into play, but the major issues of where the structure is, the type of structure, really came down to the physical requirements of a bridge at that location. And we're happy to go into that in a lot more detail. But I just wanted to make that point. The other point that I would make related to Trimet's overall contribution to that bridge, recall that this is really a broadly funded project of the Portland-Milwaukee project. And Trimet's contribution overall of the $1.49 billion total cost is about 4.5% of the total. So again, federal government at 50%, the state government, local governments, all contributing, and local land donations as well from some adjacent property owners have all contributed to that overall project cost. I just wanted to make that clarification if I could. Second, I wanted to provide just a quick update on our budget, and most of you attended this morning's meeting with the Multnomah County Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission. They asked, I think, some very illuminating and good questions about the budget. And we've also heard from the public about a number of these things. Frankly, not a lot of comments to date, and I think that's probably good. It begins to illustrate that the budget is seen as a positive. We've received about 35 comments so far. Most of those comments were positive related to the overall budget, but then perhaps included specific requests for service improvements. My bus is crowded or my bus is late, those sorts of issues. And obviously we hope that the investments in service that we've included in this budget will be able to address many of those concerns head on. I'd also just note that what we'll do at your May 14th board briefing is we'll bring you up to date on the budget. Obviously, we're learning things, both from the TSCC, from our conversations with you, from our conversations with advisory committees and the public at large. And so we'll bring you, if you will, some updates to the budget that we would like to make before final adoption at the May 14th briefing. Obviously make that very public as well. One of the other things that we're working on, as you well know, is the report that LTK engineering firm has been doing on the state of good repair related to the light rail system. And there are some recommendations that come related to staffing and, for example, IT resources associated with supporting that maintenance effort at a higher level. And so there'll be some additional suggestions related to the budget for you at that point. And again, what we're working toward is aiming the opportunity for budget adoption by the board at the May 28th business meeting. Finally, I just wanted to bring you up to date a little bit on the Title VI complaint that was filed by Opal. And if I might ask our General Counsel, Shelley Devine, give you a quick update on where we are with that. And then we'll be asking John L. Bell to actually come up as well to talk to you a little bit about what is a transit equity analysis related to the Title VI program that is at issue here. So, Shelley?
Thank you, Neil. Good morning. As you'll recall, we received the formal response to the Opal complaint from the FTA in March. They sent us a formal request for information. They had a number of questions that they asked us, a number of document requests that they made, and we timely responded to that in detail on April 10th, so earlier this month. April 11th, excuse me, and we gave them all of the documents and information that they had requested, as well as an overview of our narrative response, which we sent copies to all of you a couple of weeks ago. We also sent a courtesy copy to Opal's, the complainant's attorney of record, so they have that as well. We have a couple of copies here just of the response itself that are available if anyone in the audience wants it as well. No surprises on what we responded to the FTA on. As we had told you before, consistent with that, we informed the FTA that we believe that this complaint is seriously untimely and that it should be dismissed. We also raised a couple of substantive points, but the overarching view of things was that what we asked them to do was three things: dismiss the complaint as untimely, make some sort of a determination as to whether or not this type of allegation that a transfer policy change is in fact or is not in fact a fair change. We need to know, because we're going, we've pressed the pause button on Ordinance 332, and we'd like to know going forward. And then we offered to work closely with the FTA in fashioning a transit equity analysis if that's what they end up determining. So that's where we are. We'll wait to hear back from the FTA, and we hope to do so shortly.
And again, this whole issue, what is a transit equity analysis? I wanted John L. to just remind you a little bit about the standards and requirements that we meet related to that.
Great. Thank you, Neil. Good morning, President Warner, members of the board. For the record, my name is John L. Bell, Trimet's Director of Diversity and Transit Equity. What I'll do today is give you sort of a refresher, a quick brief overview of what's required when Trimet conducts a formal Title VI transit equity analysis. You hear a lot about equity analyses, and there's very specific ways by which we need to conduct an equity analysis under the guidelines of FTA. So we'll go through that. I'm going to do this real quickly. I'm going to put it all on the slide here. Okay, so there are two areas where we would conduct a formal Title VI equity analysis. The first one is when there is a major service change. We'd conduct an equity analysis for 25% change in route length or 25% change in revenue hours due to frequency or span change. So that's under the threshold of a service change, a major service change. The second area where we would conduct a formal Title VI analysis are changes to fare, and this is true for any changes, either increase or decrease. That's also true for any change in fare media, such as a migration that we're going to be undergoing here and are undergoing to the e-fare. So those are the two triggers, if you will, two thresholds, which triggers a formal Title VI equity analysis that goes to FTA, and then now, per the new FTA regulations, comes before the Board of Directors for your consideration. So a few graphics here. I'm going to see if I can, oh, look at there, okay. So a few hypothetical examples, and I'm going to start left and work our way around the clock here. The first is, as we pointed out, a major service change would occur if originally we had 4 buses, so up at the top 4 buses, which were running every 15 minutes. If we were to reduce this, again, this is hypothetical, to 3 buses every 20 minutes, this would be 25% reduction, thus requiring a Title VI transit equity analysis. We use these examples when we went out to the community to gain feedback on our Title VI policies, and it was very helpful in terms of graphic. Another example is if we were to reduce the route length. Before we have 20 miles, if that was reduced, 20 miles of service, if that was reduced to 15 miles, that would constitute a 25% reduction, and thus again requiring a Title VI transit equity analysis. As I pointed out, the major service change threshold or sort of trigger also is true for service hours. Here what we have is we have service running from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. If we were to reduce that, again hypothetically, to 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., that would be a reduction 25%, again requiring a Title VI transit equity analysis. And of course for any fare changes up or down. I should also point out that the Transit Equity Advisory Committee had a lot of deliberation over, Trimet, what do these policies really mean? It's interesting for us to know what this means to meet our federal Title VI requirements, but what does it mean on the ground in terms of equity impact? And as a result of that, what the Transit Equity Advisory Committee recommended to Trimet and what the General Manager has since operationalized as an administrative threshold is we would conduct equity analyses, and we are, for 10% change in either of those categories, for either reduction in route length or reduction in hours of service. So we've put on a much more onerous requirement on ourselves that we don't send to FTA, but we internally are looking at any reduction, 10% or more. So in thinking about how a Title VI equity analysis would occur within the context of a transfer change, and as the General Counsel pointed out, this is a bit of uncharted territory for us. We don't know what FTA will decide at this point. But in order to be able to conduct an equity analysis, there are a couple of questions we'd first have to answer. First, does a change in transfer policy have a disproportionately high and adverse impact on riders of color and or on low-income riders? And again, low-income riders for Trimet is defined as those who are at the 150% federal poverty level. More specifically, we need to assess if there was an overall average increase or decrease in transfer time and how that compares to trips made by white and non-Hispanic and higher income earners. So essentially, you're comparing and contrast with our protected groups, minorities, as well as low-income folks, and comparing that to non-minorities and higher income groups. So, as is true for all of our equity analyses and the work that we're currently doing under what we know as the Title VI guidelines as they currently stand, we need to collect a number of pieces of information, data, before we're able to answer some of these questions. So to answer these questions, we need to know first from the riders the length of trips by day of week, transfer activity, if they transfer and when they transfer, demographic profile information such as race, ethnicity, and household income. And finally, we need to know how these riders are paying for fares. Are they paying cash? Are they purchasing it a day pass? We need to know sort of the paying behaviors, if you will. All of this information, I should point out, would need to be collected through an on-board survey in order for us to gain this type of information to conduct the analysis. Much of this analysis would require a new survey instrument because we don't ask a transfer question currently. So I know this is kind of a technical piece of information, but I think the bottom line is there are things that we do within the context of transit equity which are federally required, and that's where that Title VI, you hear Title VI a lot. But there are additional things that Trimet is doing that's beyond necessarily what's required federally. A few of those examples are we have been working with Portland State University on a seminal study, it's the first of its kind in the nation, to better understand transit-dependent riders, including the barriers to accessing our services. And this has also included a number of focus groups with our community-based organizations and advocacy partners, including OPO and others. As pointed out by Director Siragosa, the Transit Equity Advisory Committee has selected developing a transit equity lens and index as a work plan topic for 2014. And once completed, this will really help us to strengthen our proactive approach in reducing, considering, and better understanding transit inequities. So how do we get beyond Title VI? That's where this important work of the equity lens and equity index really comes into play. And then ongoingly, we are considering equity implications and impacts in our service enhancement efforts as well as our service restoration efforts. So with that, that concludes my